Over the next few weeks, I'm going to transform this office into a children's room, starting today with shaker paneling. By the end of this video, you will be able to tell how difficult it is, how much it costs, and how long it takes to do shaker paneling as a newbie.
Being a parent, a dad, it's impossible to describe what it means to me. It's impossible to describe what she means to me. Every smile, every hug, every good morning is a precious moment. There are many ways that parents show their love. Creating the space for my daughter to play, laugh and relax in is one of the best ways I have. I just hope I can do it right.
The shaker paneling is going to be installed on this wall, that wall, and the wall right behind you. But in order to do that, first we need to empty the room. And that is everything gone. And I mean everything. Well, there's some new additions to the room which are behind me, but I want you to ignore that for the time being. That is a subject for the next video. Apart from that though, everything is out of this room. And look, even the floor is out. But that's another thing I want you to ignore because that is also a subject for another video. And so are all these holes that are currently on my walls. I have to deal with those, but again, the subject of this video is going to be shaker paneling, which is gonna go on this wall, as I said, the other wall on the other side, and then a small wall which you didn't see before over here. The first thing I want to do, and it's generally a very good idea, is to create a template on the wall just to make sure I've got the right setup, because I don't want to install the paneling and then suddenly I don't like it and I have to remove everything. So it's a really good idea to do that. I'm going to do that using cheap masking tape. Don't use your frog tape for this kind of thing, because you're gonna throw it away. Use some cheap masking tape, create a template, confirm you like it, confirm you like all the squares and all the distances before actually committing and starting installing things onto the wall. Let me start by talking you through the height. And the way we're gonna do this is by essentially measuring the wall from the skirting board all the way up. And I've done this before, so the wall is 216 centimeters tall. If you can't see that, I'll put it on the screen because I'm not sure you can see the charcoal on this wall. And then I'm gonna divide that by 2, and that's gonna be 108 centimeters. So this is the height I want to come up to with my paneling. And let me mark that with the painter's tape so you can definitely see that properly. And there we go. This is where I want to come up. And this is everything, right? This isn't just the vertical lines, this is also the horizontal lines. Essentially my top panel is gonna come up all the way up to here. Now, in terms of width, I have 275 centimeters to play with. So let's write that down here. And my first assumption is that I'm aiming for 6 boxes, 6 rectangles, which means 7 vertical strips. And that means if you take 275 minus 7 by 6.5, which is the width of each strip for me, and then you divide that by 6, it means essentially that each rectangle is going to be about 38 centimeters wide.
I'm using my new laser to mark the top of the paneling. You can of course simply leave a few marks using a measuring tape and connect the dots, but this saves a bit of time. I'm using my pencil to draw the paneling on the wall. This is something I regret later on in the video, but it is the easiest way to then put the masking tape on the wall in all the right places and bring the pattern to life.
Okay, I'm now very happy with the layout on both sides. On the long wall over here, we're gonna go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rectangles and one sort of implicit rectangle. I'll show you what I mean by that later on. And then on the other side, we have 1, 2, 3 rectangles. The little issue we have here is the switch. We've hit the switch over here, which I'm not really sure how I'm gonna deal with, but I'm gonna find a way. I think we're gonna have to cut this top panel and allow the switch to go on top, and then complement that with another cut below and above, so the switch sits nicely. We avoided that issue over here where we have the socket, because the panel is gonna go right next to it and there isn't gonna be any issues. The next step for me is to clean the top of the skirting board, because the bottom panel is going to rest on the skirting board, and I want to clean the caulk and the paint so the panel sits on it evenly.
I'm using my filling knife to cut the caulk on top of the skirting boards. I'm being careful not to push the filling knife too deep and then stick the skirting boards all together. Once the caulk is off, I then sand the skirting boards lightly. This process isn't difficult, but it does require a little bit of patience.
The skirting board is now nice and clean. Look, nice, smooth, no caulk, no paint. So my MDF panels can sit on top very nicely. The next step for me is to cut all the panels to size. With a little bit of math, I know exactly what size of panels I need. For example, all the vertical panels are 95 centimeters tall, and that's because, as we said before, the height of the paneling overall is 108 centimeters. We are going to have 2 panels horizontally, which means that's 13 centimeters off. So the rest of the height is 95 centimeters, and that's my vertical panels. And I need 16 of them. I need 6 on this side, 6 on the other side, which is going to be identical to this side, and then 4 on that small wall. And then I need 4 more cuts for those panels that are going to be sitting on top and at the bottom of my paneling. I'm going to be doing all of my cuts using my new miter saw, which is placed right here. Now, because I have 16 of these and I want them to be identical, I've created this little jig here, which kind of holds this in place, so I can just simply swap a panel, cut it, take it off, do the next one, since they're all going to be identical. You can totally do this using a miter box and a manual saw, and God knows I've been doing a lot of that on the channel over the last year or so. However, finally I got myself a miter saw, which should make the job a lot easier.
One thing to be careful with when cutting MDF is that it can be dangerous. MDF produces tiny wood dust full of something called formaldehyde. The dust can settle deep into your lungs and cause respiratory issues or even cancer. This is why it's super important to wear an appropriate dust mask, safety glasses, gloves, and use an extraction vacuum. If possible, do the cutting outside or at least in a well-ventilated place. I'm in the UK with unpredictable weather and I can't do this outside, but I am taking all of the other precautions. It only takes a couple of extra minutes.
All of the MDF panels have been cut. They're over here. I'm very impressed with the quality of these MDF panels. They're solid, sturdy, easy to cut, and they come pre-primed, which means you don't have to buy extra primer and spend all that time priming them. Big shout out to thisiswholesale.co.uk for supplying the shaker paneling kit for today's video. If you are in need of a shaker paneling kit or a slats paneling kit or even just some door liners, head over to thisiswholesale.co.uk or mdfwarehouse.com and they will sort it out for you. But now it's time to start installing all of these panels that we've just cut onto the walls.
And there goes the template I just spent hours putting on. But that means it's time to install the panels. There are 3 main ways you can do this. You can use screws if you can find the studs on the drywall. You can use adhesive, you can use nails, or a combination of the above. I feel like screws are an overkill for such light panels, so I'm using a combination of adhesive and nails in places where the panel might not be straight. To be fair, I think I only used 1 nail in the whole installation, since the walls were very straight and these MDF panels are super straight too. As I go, I ensure that the distance between the vertical panels remains at 38.2 centimeters and that every panel is more or less level, either vertically or horizontally.
The panels are on the wall on this side, at least. The gaps are good, even, equal. By the gaps, I mean the spaces between the vertical panels. There's some gaps which there's always going to be, these are never going to sit perfectly flush. The panels are level though, so we're gonna have to deal with the gaps later on. This is something that I expected, but for now on, I'm going to continue over on the other side, which is essentially a mirror of this.
I moved to the opposite wall and repeat the exact same process. For some reason my camera kept losing focus, but I think you are able to tell that I'm basically building with Lego blocks at this point. Onto the last wall, and the difference here is that not all the rectangles are of the same size. The one in the middle is kinda aligned with the radiator holders. I experimented with this when I did the template, and this is the pattern that looked best. The other thing to deal with is the light switch. I remember that I have a little frame that's supposed to go around it, and what I did was cut the paneling 45 degrees to meet the frame. I'm not sure what the right answer was here, let's just hope this looks good when finished.
The paneling is now on all three walls. The next step is the most crucial. You have to remember, shaker paneling is supposed to be modern and smooth and slick, which means we can't allow any gaps or spaces. So the next step for me is to caulk inside the rectangles to close all the gaps between the panels and the wall, the panels and the door, and around the paneling. And then I'm going to use some wood filler to fill the gaps between the panels themselves. This finish needs to be absolutely seamless.
I start by applying caulk inside the rectangles using my sealant gun. Then I use a slightly wet brush to smooth the caulk and remove the excess. And finally I use some wipes to clean the panels. This was taking too long. I started using my finger instead of the brush, which still wasn't ideal, and then I remembered I bought a special sealant applicator which really sped the process up, but the ultimate hack was to apply the right amount of caulk, which required a bit of practice. I then move on to using the wood filler for the gaps between the panels. One thing to note is that normal wall filler might crack due to MDF sucking the water out of it fast, so it's best to use a two-part wood filler which hardens very quickly. I mix small batches of filler and I remove any excess carefully with a filling knife to avoid too much sanding.
We are nearly ready for paint. I'm actually really happy how this turned out. The gaps have been closed both inside the rectangles and between the panels. You can still see them, obviously there's still 2 coats of paint that are gonna go on top, but generally I'm very happy how this looks at the moment. We are almost ready for paint. There's only a couple of things I want to do. One is touch up a couple of places with primer, especially on the edges, sand everything lightly, and then I think we're ready to paint. So let's do it.
I'm applying a couple of coats of primer on the edges and on the cuts to make sure the paint sticks correctly. Then I sand the whole area lightly before removing all the dust and frog taping the perimeter.
We're ready for paint. Yellow.
I'm adding a little water to make the paint thinner and more workable, and then I start painting using a roller and a brush. Let me know what you think of this color in the comments once you see the final result. There is not much to talk about, so enjoy a little cut of me painting.
The first coat is done, and I am a little worried we're going to need more than 2, especially because of the pencil. I didn't think about this. I thought it was gonna be just fine, but I can still see this pretty well, and I'm not sure it's gonna be covered with the second coat. we will see. I suppose we'll see soon enough. But you won't see that, no point. It's going to be exactly identical to what you just saw. Let's do this instead. The paneling is done. This is just the very first step in this room's transformation into a children's room. As you can imagine, there's still a lot more to come. But already the impact the paneling has made on the room is incredible. It provides sleek modern lines, it provides depth, it makes the room happier with this nice bright yellow color. I'm very pleased with the final result. And of course, as I said, there are still a few elements we need to do in this room which will connect with the paneling and with this bright yellow color to make this room a happy, nice place for a child to spend time in. Now it's time to talk about cost and effort over the last few days. In terms of cost, you need to consider that this was about 7 meters of paneling overall with 38 centimeter gaps. This does affect everything from cost to effort. If you are doing, I don't know, a couple of squares on a 2-meter wall, obviously that's not gonna take you as much time as it took me to do a 7-meter wall with 38 centimeter gaps. That said, my paneling was obviously supplied by thisiswholesale.co.uk, and again, big shout out because I think the quality of those panels was very good. But if I was to buy it myself, it would have cost me about 75 quid for the MDF panels. And that was really the most major cost. The second most major cost was paint, which was 55 quid with delivery. I only used about 30% of that because I still need the rest for the rest of the project. The panels, they came pre-primed, so I probably saved 20-30 quid on the primer. And then the next most major expense was 16 quid on the wood filler. So this is to fill the gaps between the panels. I barely used any, so I'll definitely use that for my next projects as well. And then there were some smaller expenses, some consumables, things like 2 tubes of adhesive, which was about 7 quid as well. And then 2 tubes of caulk, which was another 7 quid. All in all, that is £160 for, as I said, 7 meters of shaker paneling with 38 centimeter gaps. In terms of how easy or difficult it was, I would put it on easy to maybe medium on the DIY sort of scale, but it heavily depends on how much area you have to cover and what pattern you're going to use. The thing that I spend a lot of time on, which not everyone will have to do, is cutting the panels because the rooms in my house are not very tall, so I had to cut 16 of this vertical panels because I didn't want them to dominate the room completely. I want them to take about half of the space of the room. So if your room is taller, you probably don't need to cut any of that. You only need to cut a couple of pieces, some of these horizontal panels, which is gonna save you probably half a day of work on doing that alone. But as I said, I think easy to medium. You do need to be careful to spend some good time on finishing, because this type of paneling, as I said earlier in the video as well, you're going for a modern, sleek, clean look, and it needs to look like that. You shouldn't be able to see lots of spaces in here and between the panels. You can still probably tell looking at my panels that they're separate, but you know, try to get it as much close to each other as possible and close those gaps for a seamless look. This is not like Tongue Groove when you're probably going for a more rustic look, right? This needs to be really clean. In terms of how much time I spend on this project, so I spend about 24 hours. So if you are doing it in 8-hour sprints, then it will probably take you around 3 working days. but again, heavily depends on how much paneling you are doing. If I was to do just the wall behind me, for example, it would have definitely taken me a day, maybe a little over a day to do, certainly not 3 days. But the more you do, the more time you need to spend, because it means you need to make more cuts, you need to fill more gaps, you need to paint more, and all of that takes time. Is therefore worth it? I think absolutely worth it, absolutely. The way this paneling and this color have already transformed the room with more depth and a nice, clean, bright look, I think it's totally worth the 3 days effort. But this isn't something you do for a little while. This is something that's gonna stay in this room probably for many years to come. And 3 days of my time, I think it was absolutely worth it. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoy this kind of thing, like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you the next time. Take care.